Problem number 15 is also a truth table, and again I've created the table and I've boxed and labeled the final. The conditional in this problem is the final because it is the most dominant, and when I label the numbers, it's 1, 2, 3. That would finish the left side, with the most dominant being the conjunction. The only thing is 4 on the right side, and to get the final we're going to look at 4 and 3, the most dominant on either side. So now we're ready to complete the table. So column 1 is P, which is true, true, false, false. Column 2 is not Q. Again, not Q means the opposite of Q, so that would be false, true, false, true. Time to sing your song. The song would be for and. Recall that and is true is true, all else is false. True and true is here in row 2, so that would be true. All of the other situations are not true and true, so there would be false. And you've finished the left side of the final. The right side only has column P, that would be true, true, false, false. And now you're ready to evaluate the final, and the final is the conditional. So we haven't had a chance to review the key for the conditional. If you recall, the key for the conditional is true, then false is false, all else is true. Okay, so now what we want to do is look at the red columns and see, do we have a true on the left and a false on the right? If we do, then it's false. If not, it's true. We see the only true we have here, and it's not a false over here, so that means all of them are true. Okay, number 16. It says evaluate the statement. Determine the truth value for each simple statement. What that means is what we're going to do is replace P with true, Q with false, and R with false, and just evaluate it. It's like doing one row of a truth table. So not, I'm going to replace P with true, Q with false, P with true, and R with false. Okay, now we follow the dominance order, which means we're going to do inside the parentheses here first. So true and false. When you evaluate true and false, remember that's going to be false because true and true is true, all else is false. And when you evaluate true or false, if you recall, true, false or false is false, so this would be a true statement. Okay, and now we want to do not false. Well, not false is true. And then finally, if true, then true. Well, recall that the conditional statement is true, then false is false. So since that's not that situation, this would be a true statement. And since it's the end of the argument, the entire statement is true. Number 17. This requires a little bit of prior knowledge. Football season is in July. Well, hopefully you know that. If you don't, you need to look that up. On the test, I won't give you something that you have to have prior knowledge for. It'll be more like number 16. Okay? But football season is in July. Well, that's false. Or baseball is in season in July. Well, baseball, they do play in July. So that's false or true. And recall that the or statement is false or false is false, all else is true. Well, this is not false or false, so this is true. And that's how you do those problems. Number 18, converse, inverse, and contrapositive. Remember that converse means to switch, inverse means to negate, and contrapositive means to switch and negate. Now, on the last time we took this test for Chapter 3, some of you just wrote that. Recall that what I need is the entire sentence with those ideas reflected. So the converse, if we switch this, the if stays in place, the then stays in place. What switches is the P and Q. So this would come here, and that would go there. So if the streets of Hampton will be flooded, are flooded, however you want to write that, then there is a nor'easter. And I'll just abbreviate. Okay, the inverse. The inverse is to negate it, which means go to your original problem, don't switch anything, just make each each one of these statements negations. So if there isn't a nor'easter, and I'm going to abbreviate that, then the streets of Hampton will not be flooded. Okay, so it just means to negate that. And then contrapositive, you do both. Okay, you both switch and negate. So you can look at the converse that you've already switched and negate that, or you can look at the inverse that you've negated and switch it. It's up to you how you want to do it, but you have to do both. So if the streets of Hampton are not flooded, then there isn't a nor'easter. Okay, and that's converse, inverse, and contrapositive. Okay, the last problem of Chapter 3's exam review is in determining whether a statement is valid or invalid. To do that, we're going to need a truth table, but you'll see we don't have a statement to prove yet. That's based on your translations of these sentences. So I'm going to say the television is on as Q, and I cannot concentrate is Q. P is the television is on, and Q is I cannot concentrate. So if I write that in symbol form, it would be P then Q, because that's a conditional, if then. Second statement, I cannot concentrate. Well, since I said Q was I cannot concentrate, that would be Q. Therefore, you draw another conditional. The television is on. Well, we said P is the television and is on, so that's P. Recall that with valid and invalid arguments, you are required to now put parentheses around the first statement and insert a conjunction. So that is the statement that we now want to prove, whether it's valid or invalid. So it always breaks down to the same way. The final answer is always the second conditional, and it always numbers as column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the left, 6 on the right of the final, 7 is the final. You look at 5 and 6 to get 7. Okay, so let's start putting in our values. P is column 1, that's true, true, false, false. Q is column 2, it's true, false, true, false. And you hit your first operator, the conditional. Recall that the conditional is true, then false is false, all else is true. So when I do that, I see a true, then false here in row 2. That's false, all else are true. And now I want to do column 4, which is Q. Well, Q is true, false, true, false. And then I want to evaluate the conjunction, that's the and. Recall, true and true is true, all else is false. You'll see I see a true and true in both rows 1 and 3. So this is true as well as that. And row 2 and 4 would be false. Moving over to column 6, that would be P, true, true, false, false. And now finally we will evaluate the final. And I'll pick just a funny little pen there. Remember that we're looking at a conditional. That's going to be true, then false is false, all else is true. You'll see that in row 3 we have a true, then false, so that's false. The rest of these would be true. And when you look at this problem, we see that we have a false. If you have even one false in your final answer, it is an invalid argument. If they're all true, it would be valid. In this case, since we have a false, it is invalid. And that completes the Chapter 3 exam review.